Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started for the Sustainability Advisory Commission. Staff, will you please call the roll?
Tomas Delgado,
Here.
Stacy Gloss,
Here.
Jessica Lemcool,
Here.
Andrew Stump,
Here.
Morgan White, Grace Wilkin,
Here.
and Luke, how do you pronounce your last name?
Westalker. and
Westalker. Luke Westalker.
Here.
Great.
Great, and I'll just say a quick welcome back to everybody. This is our first in-person meeting where we're all meeting back in person in council chambers this evening. So thank you for making it. I'm excited for our agenda this evening. We've had a couple of meetings where we haven't had the minutes for approval for the past minutes from meetings for March and June. If we could go through one at a time, I'd like to see if there's a motion to approve the minutes from our March meeting.
I'd move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I will second.
Excellent. Any discussion or changes on the March minutes? Okay, not hearing any. Since we are back in person again, I don't think that we need to call roll. Is it okay if we just say all in favor?
Sure.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the March 2022 minutes from the March meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. I believe that also in your packet you'll have received the minutes from our June meeting. We didn't have a meeting in July. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for June?
I motion to approve.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tomas. Any discussion or changes required to those minutes? Yes, Grace, go ahead.
We just had a little sentence struck from this one. Is that right? Is this one?
Yeah, Grace emailed me this earlier today. Is it the last sentence in the last paragraph?
I think the last sentence, first page on the staff report.
Yeah, there was just, the text was confusing the composting effort and our bulk purchase programs. So I'm having that corrected this week, and it'll be reflected on what we publish and post.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the draft minutes from June? Okay. All in favor of approving the June minutes as amended that will be posted this week, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, motion carries. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda tonight that members or commission would like to bring up? Yes, Grace.
I was wondering if we could just immediately after, or maybe after public input, before or after public input, just do quick introduction since we have a new member with us.
I think that I'm okay with that. I'm just going to look around. Is everybody okay with introductions? Okay, great. So we'll do that after public input. Thank you. All right, so I think that does bring us to public input. Is there anyone from the audience that wishes to address the commission this evening? Okay, moving right along then. I'll start with introductions. My name is Stacy Gloss. I'm the chair of the Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission. I've been the chair for a few years. I'm pretty bad at dates, and I've been part of the commission for a little bit longer than that as a commissioner. I've been in Urbana for 8 years, and my role in the community and my job on campus has to do a lot with energy efficiency and sustainability. I'll just call on folks. So we'll start down at the left. So Andy.
I'm Andrew Stumpf. I'm co-chair of the commission, and I guess I've been on the commission. I don't even know how long. 2008, 9, something like that. And my job at the university is working with water and energy. So.
Thanks. I'm Grace Wilkin, and I've been on this commission since right about the start of the pandemic, so losing track of times, but 2.5 years or however long it's been. And I'm also just coincidentally on city council, not a formal dual role, but also helpful. And I teach sustainability at Millikan University and also work in research under the U of I stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Luke Westacher. I'm a PhD student in chemistry at U of I. Yeah, I'm originally from Minnesota, and I've conducted policy research in Germany and the US for a few years.
Great, welcome. Glad to have you with us. Tomas?
Greetings. My name is Tomas Delgado. I've been on the SAC since 2019, and I've lived in Urbana for about 9 years now. I work as the program manager for the National Farm to School Network and am involved in a number of environmental and sort of food justice initiatives locally and regionally.
Welcome, Luke. My name is Jess Lemkool, and I guess I've lived in Urbana for like 7 or 8 years now. I think I've been on the commission about when Grace started, definitely during the pandemic. And I actually work at a local middle school as a dean. But I'm just passionate about the planet and getting kids involved and, you know, just that community connection. So excited to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
I'm Scott Tess. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the City of Urbana, and I'm staff to this commission.
And Marcus, you're also at the dais, so in case you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm Marcus Ritchie, and I'm a planner in the planning division here in Community Development Services and act as liaison between CD and the Sustainability Advisory Commission and Scott.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so next on our agenda will be our staff report, and Scott will share the goings-on for sustainability for the last month or so.
Good evening, Commission. We've got some updates on our bulk purchase program for geothermal systems, Geothermal Urbana Champaign. It says we have 6 contracts totaling 28 tons of capacity. That's actually 7 contracts totaling 32 tons of capacity. Hope to keep adding contracts to that total. We've got a couple more months of that program left. The LRC, Landscape Recycling Center, is accepting food scrap for composting on a pilot basis for pre-consumer commercial generators. So pre-consumer, that's before somebody eats. So think of back-of-house food prep. And commercial generators, think of restaurants and grocery stores. There's one hauler that is providing this service at this time. It says we have 1 generator. I think we've got a couple more signed up that are very interested, talking to the hauler. I'm not sure that they've actually generated food scrap for compost yet, but hopefully very soon. The Solar Urbana Champaign program, bulk purchase program for solar energy systems, has selected an installer for this program year. The installer is called GRNE. They have quite a few years. I forget exactly when they were founded, but they've been around for a few years. They've bid on our program before. This is the first time they've been selected. I understand that they've been growing throughout the Midwest substantially the last few years. And this year's base price, that's if you have the most basic system with the least amount of add-ons, the price you would be paying is the lowest we've ever had for the bulk purchase program this year. So that's exciting. Power hours are currently being scheduled. And it says we'll have a press release soon. The press release announcing this 7th year of this program was published today. The next item, Solar Energy System Zoning Ordinance Text Amendment, I won't comment on because Marcus is going to talk about that. And our next meeting will be September 6th at 7 p.m. here in Council Chambers.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the staff report from any members of the commission? Grace?
Thank you. I already emailed Scott a few things, so thank you for that update. I was wondering, also with their annual report, is that something you want to talk more about, or during the staff report time, or?
I think where we left that off was there was a couple of minor edits that the commission recommended. I've made those edits. I think I've emailed it back to you all. If I haven't, Andy's saying yes. But if you missed that email or whatever, let me know. I will get the final to you. And then I'm going to be putting it in city council packet, which is, my usual procedure. I'm expecting a city council appearance for other matters soon anyway, so I'll probably just put it in as a non-discussion item at city council, just in case there happens to be any questions. I will actually be there that night.
Awesome. And do we have city goals? Is it just carbon emissions, or do we have a renewable energy percentage goal also?
The city council passed a climate inheritance resolution. You can probably find it on the website, but a couple of years ago, and I think it was included both a greenhouse gas emissions goal and a renewable energy goal.
Okay, because I was just thinking as looking through this, I didn't see if it was already in there on renewable energy percentage, just because if that's a goal, it might be helpful to track that.
The problem is we can't really know because we don't have access to all of the renewable energy assets that are operating in the city. Many of them went in as, an electrical permit and a building permit and nothing more. And that may still be the practice today. And so we don't know how many they are, and we're not clocking them, so to speak. We're not privy to their metering of how much electricity they're producing. So it's not really something we have the ability to track, but let me see if I can.
Could we
find
do
that.
it for just city facilities? Because I'm not sure if if the goal was implying the whole community or city energy use.
Well, I see a draft here. Let's see if I can find the final on the city website. I think this is it. So, be it further resolved that the city of Urbana actively work toward generating 100% of the community's electricity from renewable sources by 2025.
Yeah, so community.
So, what we can know is pursuant to the renewable portfolio standard, what the renewable percentage is of the grid. And we can know that we buy renewable energy credits for 100% of the electricity that is purchased through municipal electric aggregation. And we can know that most residences and small businesses that qualify for municipal electric aggregation are in fact enrolled. But that leaves, households that have renewable energy assets, that leaves commercial facilities that have renewable energy assets as an unknown.
Thank you. I was also just a few other things, if this is a okay time to just share with the commission. I had to miss the last meeting. I think maybe I watched that recording or listened, but I didn't remember if something happened with input on hybrid meetings and if there was movement on reaching out to council about our desire on hybrid meetings. Just as a reminder or thought, because I think that there will be another discussion on that coming up soon. And then another thing was there's been some ideas on a disposable bag tax or fee, like for disposable plastic one-time use bags at retailers. That's one of the council goals, and there was kind of a group of people working on it. My understanding is that staff doesn't have the capacity to work on that, was the update we got. So also just reaching out if anyone else on the commission personally, or if something that the whole commission was interested in taking up, I think that would be a useful thing. And if there is interest, then I could put together a little bit of background information about where we are so far if SAC is kind of interested in taking that on.
So we did have some discussion. We didn't meet in July. We met in June. And so we had a discussion around hybrid meetings. I apologize because I don't remember exactly where we landed on that. So I do need to review that meeting, and then I could respond back to you with regard to the hybrid meetings. We did recognize that we allow for members of the commission to participate remotely under two conditions, and that is if they are sick or if they are on assignment for work-related reasons. We did not get as far as discussing whether or not we would look towards updating the bylaws or something to sort of make that change at that point. But I could look back through and we could have a discussion about that. I think that there was also recognition that many of us, you know, we've all been working from home during the pandemic in many instances, and so the idea of whether or not you're working from home or meeting, you know, like working from home versus being on assignment out of town, like there's sort of a blurred line there. But again, I'd have to check and see what we discussed in terms of taking any further action together or providing further public comment to the city council on that. The second item, just remind me the topic, because I did have an answer for it.
Disposable bag
Disposable
fee.
bags. I don't think that we've brought that up. I would, you know, maybe include that in new business at the next meeting if it's something that the city is still working on in a month.
I think no one's working on it.
No one's working
It's a
on it.
matter of if it gets worked on or not. And so, yes, there is time. I don't think it's going anywhere.
Okay. Okay.
I think we did talk about both things, and it felt like with both things, there was no general consensus, like the hybrid meeting and the bags. So I think there was people that were interested in the bag tax. We talked about making sure we do, if we were to do something like that, doing it in a just way that isn't disenfranchising people or like creating an undue burden for people that may not have access to the bags that they need, you know. So that was, I just remember that being a point of discussion, but we never really got to like any sort of like general consensus or like final ideas or planning on that.
If I could just add too about hybrid meetings, I understand that that's the, you know, rules in our body. I think what is, the way I see it too, some of the question for having remote access or hybrid meetings would mean that the public could participate remotely as well, which is different than what we have currently. And I don't know if any of you have called in remotely for a public meeting before, but it is quite awkward. You're just this giant voice that comes out of the ceiling. And I haven't done it, but I've heard that there's a really bad echo and delay, and it's really hard to actually be a part of the meeting. And I don't know that more than one person at a time could do that. So I think that if there is interest in that kind of thing, it would be helpful just to let council know how we're feeling, I guess one way or the other, because I think that it would require changes in public input guidelines from higher up and technology changes to move on past what we already have.
Got it. Thank you. Any comments or questions? If not, I'm going to move on. We've got two speakers here tonight that are going to give a presentation. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to our new business. We have guest speakers Lily Wilcock and Andrea Rudy from the City of Urbana who've been working on the comprehensive plan. They're going to give us an update on the comprehensive planning process and ask us for our input in that process at this time. So welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. If you have a presentation for video, if you could share it, that'll change the screen up at the front of the room.
Well, thank you for having us this evening. I know you received some communication on our topic beforehand. The Examine Urbana is really but before we get to that, we just want to do a refresher on what the compound is. It's been a while since we've done it this week, and just to kind of give you an update. Yep, it's got to be in the recording. So again, So sorry. So we wanted to just give an update on the comp plan since it has been a while since we've met with this group, just to remind you about what it is, and then we'll get into the subject matter with Lily. But the comp plan is the community's vision for where we want to be in 10 to 20 years. And it's a long-range plan. It's not something that's to address specific plans within the community or different parts of the community, but it's a long-ranging, overarching guide for the city. It also includes strategies to achieve those goals and objectives, which includes land use, neighborhood preservation, economic development, transportation, social, environmental, and quality of life decisions. And we base the decisions that are made at the city level on that comprehensive plan. We have a website that you can go to, which this is not coming up. Here we go. We have a website that has a Q&A on it that would be helpful also if you've got questions, and it's at imagineurbana.com. That was the website that we created at the beginning of the plan process. Many of you might remember the idea wall that we had to get general input, as well as a places map. But we've added a lot of things since then, and one is that question and answer, which kind of gives you a synopsis of some of the typical questions that come up. So we thought it would be helpful to say what it's not. So it's not a document that regulates or controls the use of private property. I think some people are concerned about that. It's not a neighborhood plan, but it is a community-wide plan. So it integrates general community concerns across the entire plan. It's not an unchangeable document, but one that is regularly reviewed and amended as needed. And it's not only a guiding document for our city, but it incorporates existing approved plans, such as the city's bicycle and pedestrian plans, the climate action plan, and there's several other plans that already exist that are included into the comp plan. And it's not something that sits on the shelf. It's something that's always there for staff, to guide staff and also to guide the council in making decisions about the city. So we wanted to just quickly show you the first phase engagement timeline, and there'll be a report coming out soon on that in the next few weeks. And we've analyzed that data. We're in the process of categorizing that data, but it came from community outreach. So we were at boards, commissions, and council meetings. That's kind of the squares across the top of when those occurred, and even before 2021. We had in-person interviews that took place in 2021. Neighborhood meetings, those were all online due to COVID, but we reached out to the different neighborhood meetings and had group meetings with them. We also had the urban planning class at the U of I participate with us. They had a project in the spring and the fall, so it was very helpful to have their involvement. And then the website feedback that we had, I mentioned the idea wall, the places map, and we also had surveys on that. So now we come to the heart of the meeting, and this is where Lily is going to talk to you about Examine Urbana and the link. And we do want to just remind you that link we sent you is confidential right now. It's for the commissions. It's public. We had to make it public so that you could access it. But this is an evolving document yet, and so there'll be a few drafts. We want to get the feedback from each of the commissions and committees that are involved, and then we'll have the finals up there for everybody to look at. The public will be able to view.
Yeah, and so let me quickly pull that up. So this is Examine Urbana. I think confidential, is maybe strong. It's just that it takes some time to really read this document, and so we want to incorporate your feedback before everybody reads it, in case that people are really busy and they don't have a chance to reread it for the third or second version of it. So just in order to kind of respect people's time in that process, we'd really like your feedback before this kind of is something that becomes incorporated in just existing conditions for a comprehensive plan. So part of a comprehensive plan is providing some information for the public to really understand aspects of the community that maybe is not your everyday wheelhouse. These are general topics, and staff traditionally will produce a rather lengthy report on it, and it's something that
goes to a PDF, and it's often sometimes not read, or it's read in bits and pieces that really concern the person, but there's large aspects that aren't stitched together for folks. So we're trying something a little bit differently. What you can see here is Examine Urbana. This is a draft public page. There's a link to this, as well as a quick survey to fill out after you review it. You can fill out the survey, or you can email Andrea or myself. And so you can see this chapter right here in the middle. The coming soon chapters are currently under development. If you click on that, you can go to energy environment. These chapters of the existing conditions are meant to be brief, and they are meant to not be comprehensive. They are meant to just give someone an introduction to some of the issues that you would incorporate from the view of a city and a comprehensive plan. We do want to be respectful of people's time and their attention. We want them to move on to the next chapter and read that one and enjoy it as well. So keep that in mind. There's some questions on that survey about your time and what you thought we have to add, and also maybe some things that we went into too much on. These things we collaborate a lot with Scott Tess on. I'm just going to briefly go over some of the structure of it. I've noticed that I haven't received any surveys yet, so that will be your task as a commission tonight, is to go home and review this and then fill out that survey or email comments. But they always start with kind of an introduction. The introduction will be a little bit to kind of get people incorporated to it, try to relate a little bit. We did draft these all to be as people-focused as possible. We do incorporate a little bit of data, but little snippets of interesting facts and figures that can kind of get people thinking about, a warmer, wetter Urbana is kind of some background information. I'm actually going to go a little bit into this one. We talk a little bit about what we do as a community. We have a Boneyard Creek master plan, for instance, and a Boneyard Creek zoning district. This is Cranert flooding, for instance. So we had some really great community partners who had worked with us. This is Boneyard Creek crossing. That's something we do. Our stormwater crews. We have some opportunity to embed maps and video. Some really great photos from residents of Champaign-Urbana about flooding stormwater infrastructure in our city streetscape. Each one of these chapters will go over just a section. This is just a little bit of the background information, and then it'll kind of go into the next section. So that next section, energy and environment, talks a little bit about energy and the city, what we're doing. Then there's cooling the city. The next section talking a little bit about what we do to try to make this a less warm, and what we're doing to adapt to that warmer, wetter Urbana. Really focus on explaining the tree program in Urbana, explaining what we do, what are some of the issues that are involved, what are some of our collaborators and partners in this process. And then at the very end, every single one of these chapters, and I really like this one for this chapter, has these kinds of questions just to get people thinking. We've found that if we just ask, hey, you like the environment, what do you think we should do? That gets to a conversation where someone's trying to put together a lot of things, and it doesn't capture all of their thoughts very accurately or represent everything. It puts someone on the spot. So we want to kind of leave every chapter with a couple of thoughts for them to think about, some things, ideas for them to chew on. For instance, this one has a few questions, for instance, establishing development standards, ensure walkable, transit-served, mixed-use pedestrian scale development. That's a mouthful, but when you read it and you see a picture of Paris and Commune, you start thinking a little bit about certain things, how you feel about those things, what do you think this relates to Urbana, how does this relate to Urbana. We just want to leave people with some thoughts about the future and future considerations. Mitigating Boneyard floodway and floodplain. Hopefully you leave the chapter and you feel like you understand the words Boneyard, you read a little bit about it, and you know some of the things that we do for the Boneyard. So that's something that is just getting you thinking about these aspects. Continuing to develop tree planting donors, grants, and partnerships and programs. So you get a lot of opportunities to see the people behind this. This is Kevin Sanderson, our city arborist. Local business, and there's a lot of aspects of that that are really interesting and could kind of play into a comprehensive plan. traditionally, comprehensive plans are about transportation and land use, and then that's really morphed over the years to be more of like a city vision. And so, just that aspect of growth and development is really important for the environment and energy, as well as what that means for growth internally. Kickapoo Rail Trail, how that relates to our community. And then, Grace, you mentioned, it was funny, and I took a note of it really quickly about tracking aspects of it. This was done last fall, and I was actually just finishing assessing the last comprehensive plan, and there were no measures or metrics in it. And so tracking aspects of this would be so important to make sure that we're on track and know more about our community and how it's working. And that's something that maybe we could consider, or we would like people to think about with the future comprehensive plan and energy and the environment. So that's Examine Urbana. There's chapters. There's 4 chapters up right now. There's another 4 chapters that are coming. You can kind of see. Arts and culture, energy, environment. Arts and culture has already seen the Arts and Culture Commission. Transportation will be going to BPAC this month, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. And then there's also the assessment, the 2005 comprehensive plan, the background information. What is our current comprehensive plan? What were we thinking about at the time, and how has it worked? That's always an important question to ask yourself when you're thinking about the future comprehensive plan. And kind of, we've done a lot of research last summer on that topic. And so what you can see coming up is housing, neighborhood health and safety, and development taxes. And again, these aren't the chapters of a comprehensive plan. These are just chapters of explaining aspects and issues that go along, trends and issues that go along with a comprehensive plan that relate to.
And then the next phase, we would like the public then to be able to read these different chapters so that when we get into the next phase of community engagement, we can really do a deeper dive into this subject matter. And our intent is to have the public involved in setting goals and objectives for the different themes that are going to bubble out of the comprehensive plan. And like Lily said, these aren't the themes from the data that we've gotten. This is evaluating existing conditions only at this time. We'd be glad to entertain any questions. I know many of you haven't had a chance to review it, and we can certainly answer questions after the meeting too, once you've had a chance to review. But if you could, as Lily mentioned, fill out that survey, the survey questions that were sent to you, that will help us in making changes to the plan. If you've got suggestions on what things that maybe we're missing that should be added, or just clarification if things you feel like we haven't expanded enough on something, that's why we want to bring it to you first to get those kind of comments.
I would be truly remiss if I do not tell you right away. You have to be patient with loading this page on all of the pages, and very patient. And sometimes if you get halfway through the page and the images are just like really coming up slower, just refresh. Wait patiently, and then slow back down. The first times that you access this page, it is an image-heavy document. It's also an Esri product. I don't know if anybody has experience with those, but they're a little bit rigid. And so you just have to kind of work with it a little bit and wait patiently to let it load. I've seen people use it on phones just fine, but it's, again, something that you want to make sure that you're if anything, actually, phones might be a little bit easier just because the data is constantly flowing there, whereas I think your website page is sometimes times out. So just be patient with it when you load it up for the first time. It says that here, but for some reason, the template won't let me change the font size, so it's a little bit smaller.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation and the work, the little bit that I know. You guys have been working on this for years now, I think. So thank you for all that work and presenting it to us. I really appreciate the opportunity for review and feedback from the boards and commissions. I think that's really great to involve us in this process. For the survey, Lily, it might be us, it might be the survey. I tried to do it this evening, and it wouldn't load. The website was going okay for me. I was trying to be patient and refresh and stuff, but the survey didn't load for me multiple times. So it could absolutely be my internet connection, but if no one else has done it, there might be an issue with the
Okay.
survey.
Thank you.
Yeah, we didn't have that with Arts and Culture Commission, but I wonder too if that's because many people were signed in. So there is like a sign-in process, because one of the big pushes with Imagine Urbana is to make sure we give people the opportunity to sign up for a newsletter. We oftentimes hear that, why are you asking me for public input when you haven't told me what that public input went to? So we're trying to keep up with people and build like an organic database of, hey, this is what we're doing with your public input. So
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So it could be just my internet or computer and not the survey itself, but just wanted to
We'll
let you know.
double
in
check
Yeah,
that.
we will.
We'll try it out ourselves, because, hopefully
Yeah.
there's not a glitch there.
I got to the point where it asked for sign in, and are we supposed to create a new login?
no, you can use your old login. If you've ever participated on the idea wall or a survey before on Imagine Urbana, it should be the same one.
If you were an existing user.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so digging that password back out. And then I guess I did read on here that we could take the survey multiple times because there are sections on here coming soon. And I just want to make sure that I understand. You're asking for feedback on the Examine Urbana site and the kind of issues and programs and community elements that are presented through the like tile cards on here. Is that what you're asking for feedback on?
Specifically, your feedback and expertise in energy and environment.
Okay.
So all of the boards and commissions with a related board and commission to it, to the chapter, we're going to and trying to get that feedback. You can go along and click on the other ones, but some of them might not be reviewed yet by the community experts in that area. So then you might have to go back and read it when it does get released to the public. So if you're wanting to do that, you can, feel free. You can send me multiple surveys. Also, if you've sent me a survey, you said, I filled this out and everything, and then you slept on it and you felt like, I really want to add a couple more things to it, you can either shoot us an email or fill out the survey again.
But we really don't want to, monopolize your time. We'd really
Yeah.
like focus on this one chapter. If you do have comments on the other, that's great, but we don't expect you to do that. Just if you can give us the feedback in this specific topic would be extremely helpful.
Thanks. So with the survey, yes, maybe that thing, we've talked about this in the past. I understand some of the need for having people log in and keep track and have the newsletter and stuff. I still think that's, for whatever reason, for myself and other people I've heard from, just like a daunting thing. Just being honest, I didn't do the Imagine Urbana just because I didn't feel like registering an account, and I know a lot of people who didn't, and I know that's something we've talked about before, maybe no way around it. A few things in particular with this one, if that's what you're asking. I went through the energy and environment, and transportation, I think, is also kind of relevant to us as well with some of that overlap. I didn't recall seeing anything about electric vehicle infrastructure or household hazardous waste. I don't know if there was a larger waste section, but I think those two things in particular are real growth areas. And I know it's nice to highlight all the great things in Urbana that we do have, and I think it's also important to highlight some of the things that we don't yet have as much of, especially when we're looking at 10 to 20 years. I think those are real growth areas to say we went from, I don't know how many, but maybe 10 EV chargers in all of Urbana to 100 in 10, 20 years from now. So I think that it's also would be helpful to highlight some of those growth areas in that aspect.
I like that you're referring to growth areas. You didn't call it challenges, you called it growth areas, and I like that.
Yeah. And I think that household hazardous waste, we can definitely add something to that. For electric vehicles, we might add something to energy environment, or maybe a shout out to check out the development side, because that's kind of where the city of Urbana kind of is trying to develop those kinds of pieces of infrastructure to private property.
Awesome, thank you. And then I think my last point here was, I think in the past we talked about possibly partnering SAC and you all in the comp plan on some of those targeted sessions you were talking about for public input. Is that
Certainly.
still a possibility, and is there things that we need to do to stay in touch or help make that happen?
Absolutely. We're looking for subject matter experts when we get to that point, and I'm sure we'll be drawing on this committee to help provide us, maybe some of you, or you might have thoughts on who might be subject matter experts in these various topics. We'll be sharing those, that, like I mentioned, the report. You'll see what those themes are and where we need that expertise for that next deeper dive. So yes, we will definitely be coming to each of the commissions to give us that kind of information.
And with that, coming to each of the commissions, this is part one of partnering with us and help giving us your expertise and feedback, because this is our trying to, just even though it's existing conditions and it's not the comprehensive plan or a draft plan, it's important to get your feedback and make sure that we're including the topics you want to. And we're hoping that we can keep doing that along the way.
Because this is where we're educating the public. You know, we want them to read this, and so that way they have a better handle on when we get to that next stage about where we're at, so that we can say where we want to go.
Not a comprehensive educational process, just something that gets people's feet in the water.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, because I think we're interested in that with our own SAC goals of
Sure.
public engagement and collaboration. So I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Other thoughts or questions from members of the commission? Jessica?
Yeah, I also want to say this is looking beautiful and awesome, and I think this whole project is really cool. I do agree, well, just a thought that I had looking at this is just the whole kind of waste concept, and I know even on this commission, I think we focus a lot on energy, and I know that's like a huge part of the environment, but also just waste in general is just such a huge part to me, or I think to also people, because it's something that we see every day that's super tangible. And I think it would be cool to include something about that. But at the same time, you know, I understand that, you know, are we actually like doing stuff with that? I'm not expecting you guys to, or y'all to invent that or anything, you know what I mean? So that was just a thought that came to mind. And then maybe also like the community gardening aspect or pollinator. I feel like there's a lot going on with that could be highlighted in here. And maybe inspiring others to partake. That does kind of have a positive impact on our environment. Feeling for our monarch butterfly that just, you know, put on the red list and just canary in the coal mine on that. So I think that would be just looking at it big picture, those two ideas of the waste and the green spaces. And I know you mentioned that there might be more themes that come from what the comprehensive plan. But I didn't know if that would be like those types of things, or like, are they, when you mean themes, are they like the subtopics at the top?
Yeah.
Kind of thing? You know
And
what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And I'm glad you bring up community gardens, and there's a lot going on there too, because it also overlaps a lot with arts and culture. So there's a lot fleshed out there, and it's being developed right now, but in neighborhood health and safety as well. So those two aspects are, but that doesn't mean that so this happens a lot. A lot of things are interrelated with a lot of other stuff. And this is one of the hardest parts about dividing something, that storytelling aspect of it into, and I think that's part of the reason why cities sometimes default to a PDF with very discrete chapters. I think that means that there's some call outs and call backs to certain areas. And so I'll try to take a look at that and see how we can fit in like more of that callback into the energy environment.
And when you see this report that's going to come out, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but one of the things is what you're going to see is that sustainability is woven throughout every theme. It's something that impacts each one of the themes. And so that and equity is the other theme that just is interwoven into every one of them. So rather than having them as a standalone theme, it's part of everything, which I think that's really how it exists in the real world. It should be integrated into all aspects of the community as well as the plan.
That's a really great point. And again, just, it's very engaging, the website itself, you know, the way that it's done and the amount of text with the pictures. I think it will be like, you know, really beneficial for peeps. So thanks.
Great. Other thoughts or questions?
That's right. And really like the concept and the work you've done on this. I was wondering if you were thinking of highlighting the commissions.
Yeah, we haven't found a, so,
Because on the transportation, you highlight the commission there, the bicycle
Yeah.
and pedestrian commission, but I wasn't wondering if you were going to highlight all the other commissions.
so at the so that the concept right now is, and I apologize because it's just a concept, but one would be a kind of a credits section at the very end of this, and highlighting your amazing commission, all the amazing commissions who provided feedback, but also there's been a lot of amazing staff members, one of which, of course, is Scott Tess, who provided a lot of those interesting factoids and tidbits of information. That was a lot of hard work that he dug up for me and then walked me very patiently through it every week for months. So having like a section where we call out some of those people who have been really, that's just on the concept board. I'm so glad you brought it up. So I will
I just
try to
think you
get
could-
cracking on it.
But
You
I
can
Yeah.
almost weave it into the story
Yeah,
in each
Yeah.
area.
yeah,
Yeah, I see what you're saying, like, because not every one of these has a commission, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Sustainability does, transportation does, arts and culture, of course. So maybe we do spend some time, talking about that and how important they are to shaping these, even where we're at today.
I was just thinking you could highlight what their role is,
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
what they're in charge of, I guess, or
Yeah,
how they interact with the city, so.
I like that.
Yeah,
Good suggestion. That's why we're here, because, we need to hear that, what we've missed, what makes sense, and
And I remember,
Definitely
the
incorporate.
big question for Scott, we have a water plan, right? Yeah, so that was something that was missing in the environmental part. It was, there's a water plan for water use, water quality, I guess, or water supply.
okay. Great. This is all very
But
helpful.
there's lots of things to put in there, so it
Mhm.
could get very lengthy.
yeah. You notice how the stormwater master plan just had like a slide, and it was a video of the stormwater crews. But it provides someone who, if they want to dig into it, a link and information and kind of the vocabulary around it.
I like the idea of bringing water into it as well, because that's just one of those,
Yeah,
I mean, it's water is life, and as things are, I was just listening to a podcast about how it's the salt from the pesticides is getting in our water, like people knowing about the quality and how it's tested and what we're doing to protect our water, I think is just so, that would be really awesome.
Well, in this area of being so unique, sitting on top of an aquifer, that's, you're not going to find that in other documents in other cities like this.
Thank you very much. That's great.
thank you.
I think I might have seen something, but is there like a get involved part, or if someone's like reading through this and gets really passionate about it, are there like links you've included to things like that?
That's one that would be in the comprehensive plan, the first chapter and the last chapter. So kind of sandwiched in, saying, hey, please do this in case you don't get through all the other chapters. It's in the first chapter, but it's also too in the last chapter. You've read this, you've consumed this, you've taken this in, you've definitely at least read like this 2005, like what works, what didn't work too well, what we're planning on or trying to improve upon, and how to get involved with that, which are next steps.
Thank you.
Great. I'm really excited to go through this more in depth and to provide comments in the survey. Do you have a deadline that you're asking for feedback by?
Yeah, so we're pretty flexible. It's August, but if you could provide them in the next 2 weeks, that would be fantastic. I think that's when in Champaign-Urbana, the students start to come back. Everything gets really a little bit hairier on the weekends with events.
Maybe
But the
by
August
the
19th.
Thank you.
The summer flies by, so.
Sure does.
Okay. Any other final
Okay.
comments or questions
And again,
for our guests?
Lily,
this
thank
evening?
you for, I used that word confidential. It's really not confidential. It's more about, we want all the document to be more finalized before the public starts looking at it, so. But this is the only way we can share it, is by making it live like this.
Just last quick one was that
Sure.
Andrew's survey is working, before you go down a rabbit hole of looking if there's a problem. I think it was me.
Thanks, Grace.
I tried doing it from the sign-in at the top.
Yeah.
And that just kind of spun around, but if you go down to the bottom,
Oh, man. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
that
good to
sounds like
know.
almost a
there's
help
like
desk
2
ticket.
clicks. Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, cool.
good,
Thank you
good.
so much. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation this evening. Really appreciate your time for joining us, and I look forward to commenting on this soon. Our next speaker tonight is going to be Marcus Ritchie, urban planner with the city of Urbana, to talk about the solar energy system zoning ordinance that I believe passed city council. But we've struggled to get, our meetings to align. So we're excited to learn more about this ordinance here this evening. Do you have a presentation that you'll
Yes.
bring up as well?
I do.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, commission members. As some of you may remember, I've come to the commission a couple times for input about the proposed solar energy system text amendment. Got some good input and feedback from you into those draft documents, and then wrote up the draft text amendment language, took it to Plan Commission on April 21st. They provided some additional feedback on the text language. We made some revisions, and then in between it going from Plan Commission to Committee of the Whole of City Council, we had gotten some input from council members, and we then as staff decided that it might be a good idea to revise the text language and took that to Committee of the Whole. And some of those changes were shifting all of the zoning districts into the special use permit category, and actually striking some of the zoning districts that would likely not see any applications based on their size or location, like in very urban areas. And again, that was strictly for the solar farm, not the smaller solar arrays or the building mounted solar systems. And then council approved the revised ordinance language on May 23rd. So previously, that language coming from Plan Commission was that solar farms would be permitted by right in the agricultural district, and then they'd be permitted as a special use in all of our business districts. The Conservation, Recreation, Education District, which is where schools and parks are located, our industrial districts, and the higher intensity residential districts. But as I mentioned, some of these, the neighborhood business district, these are small parcels. They're usually located in residential neighborhoods, and you're not going to have a 10-acre, 5-acre parcel available to put in a solar farm. Similarly, the R7 is the University Residential Zoning District. These are small individual parcels in like West Urbana area or around the university. You're not going to have the acreage to put in a solar farm, so it's not practical to put it in a district that's going to allow a solar farm by special use or by permitted use. So it was suggested to strike the agricultural district permitted by right, and we moved that into the special use district, and then we struck several of the special use districts. And then so the final outcome was solar farms would be a special use in these districts: agricultural, the higher intensity business districts, CRE, both of our industrial districts, and then the 3 multifamily residential zoning districts. What that then looks like is these are the areas that somebody can apply to put in a solar farm, the larger scale installation. Again, that all depends on whether the parcel is large enough to support a 4 or 5 acre array. We didn't do a GIS analysis. As you can see, there are single parcels here south of Florida Avenue, well, you would never put in a solar farm. It simply has the appropriate zoning to put one in.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure,
I'm
please.
Sorry. So I hear you're using like the term solar farm, and I'm wondering if this is only then for like property where the systems would be like a ground mounted array and covering that whole property, as opposed to an array that might be on top of a building. But I don't just mean like a house, I mean like a huge department store or like the Lincoln Square Mall or something
Right.
like that. Did those, would those conditions, is that part of this ordinance or is that different?
That's different.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And so we will get into that when we actually hit the text. And this was basically the one challenge that we had to revise language for. And then when we made those shifts between the two, there really wasn't a whole lot of impact to where solar farms, the larger scale principal use facilities could go in. The changes are, this little area in green that used to be allowed under the previous set of zoning districts. And then when we shifted it, it made it so that that little green spot could no longer have a solar farm, but the area around it could. This might be getting into a little more detail than you need. And this is the southern half of the city. You can see just a couple spots that were no longer allowed to have solar farms, those spots that are in green. So getting into the actual language of the ordinance, we changed section 2.1 to add solar energy system here as a call out to say, please look at Article 13 if you want to know about the regulations that govern solar energy systems. So just a small housekeeping bit to direct people what section to look at. We changed the table of uses to add solar farm as a principal use under the industrial category because it is producing energy for the grid. Again, this is solar farm as a principal use, which is a use that is designed to produce energy to be put out on the grid, not a solar array, which is powering another use, whether that's a house or a factory or a restaurant. We updated section 6.5. 6.5 is our development regulations section. It used to have a subsection that allowed solar arrays serving single and two-family residences to be located in a side yard. And it said as long as they're less than 6 feet tall, they can be installed in a side yard up to 18 inches from a property line. Because our whole premise for dealing with solar arrays, the smaller scale site-based facilities, was to treat them as accessory structures like any other accessory structure, like a garage or a shed. We no longer needed a specific call out to say this accessory structure is allowed to be in a side yard because we're going to treat it exactly like every other accessory structure. So we just simply struck out that paragraph. We are treating solar arrays as accessory structures in the city as if it was a pergola or a shed or a garage or any other accessory structure on the property. And that was the one change in section 6.5. Section 6.6 is a development regulation section that addresses screening. This was one of the sections that previously gave us a little bit of problem, especially when a commercial facility wanted to put in a solar array. It says ground-mounted mechanical equipment for all non-residential uses shall be screened from view at ground level from public rights-of-way and adjacent residential districts. Previously, we treated solar arrays of any size as a mechanical, a system that helped power another principal use facility. And because of that, and so similar to an outdoor condensing unit, you would have to screen that condensing unit from other residential uses and from the road. Not sure why, but that's how the zoning ordinance was written. And we had people end up not putting in solar arrays for their businesses because they would have had to put in a half a mile of landscaping to screen it from the road. Or put up a significant buffer, landscaping buffer, to screen it from a neighboring residential subdivision. Treating solar arrays as an accessory structure means we're going to treat them like a pole barn or like a garage. And we don't require those to be screened from residential uses or from roads. So that then changed this section, and we added a footnote that said screening of solar energy systems is regulated by Article 13.9, which is the special development section that we created for solar arrays. So again, we're no longer treating them as mechanicals. We're treating them as an accessory structure equally. So then we move into the brand new section that's in section 13, which is the section of the zoning ordinance that addresses things like wind farms and mobile home parks and planned unit developments and telecommunication towers. Large scale things that can have large scale environmental impacts or impacts on people or on the urban fabric. We followed the same sort of format as the wind farm section. Wrote the purpose statement. This was a mishmash of our other sections, but also a section from, I think, NREL's, National Renewable Energy Laboratories, recommended purpose statement for solar energy text amendments. Talks about it's in the public interest to encourage the use and development of solar energy systems as a clean renewable energy source, as well as to help promote local clean jobs. So it isn't just it's good for the environment, it's also good for economic development and for the people. We have 3 definitions. We define a solar energy system. It's broad enough to include solar panels, solar flowers, anything that uses PV panels or other devices to convert sunlight to electricity. 5 years from now, if you have photovoltaic algae, okay, this is going to cover that too because it's other devices. We have 2 types of solar energy systems. We have solar array, which is defined as an accessory use system, and solar farm, which is a principal use solar energy system. We initially considered things like adding in language that talked about where the energy was going to be going and going to be used for, or what its intended use was, and it got, you tried to define it more, and you just kept on going down rabbit holes to try and cover all the ends. Planning Commission suggested, hey, why don't you rely on the existing definitions of principal use and accessory use that are already in the zoning ordinance, and rely on your zoning administrator to look at the proposed thing and determine whether it's a principal use or an accessory use system. So that's what we did. The footnotes direct people to the definitions of principal use and accessory use there in the zoning ordinance. Applicability, this ordinance applies only to new solar energy systems. We don't retroactively apply it to existing systems. The next statement, permits required. Solar energy systems require all applicable permits. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's good to let people know, this isn't the only thing you need to worry about. You might need to get an electrical permit, a solar permit. You might need to do other things. You have to get all of them. You can't just go ahead and build it. And it's similar language that's in our other sections. These are those bits from the zoning ordinance that already talk about principal use and accessory use and principal structures and accessory structures. And then they themselves refer to each other. You know, a principal structure is housing a principal use. An accessory structure is housing an accessory use. And then an accessory use is one that is incidental to a principal use. So you put a solar energy system on a garage to power a house, or on the roof of a factory to power the factory. That solar energy system is an accessory structure because it is a structure that is doing an accessory use, because that accessory use is powering the principal use of the house or the factory.
This makes sense to me, the way that you're describing it. I'm wondering if you've had any developers or residents or business owners call for clarification on these definitions at all, or does it seem to be clear?
We don't get a whole lot of solar development. A developer that has already been working on a data center and solar array at the north end of town did request the new language because they are developing other systems, and it might help them reduce their screening requirements. So that's going to be good. And then, you know, to get into the nuts and bolts, which I won't, this helps define what accessory uses are. What does customarily incidental mean, et cetera, et cetera. It relies on the zoning administrator to make that determination. And then moving back into the zoning ordinance amendment, the zoning administrator shall determine if it's a solar farm or a solar array based on its intended purpose and on the criteria for accessory uses outlined in section 5.2, which is that section that I just showed you. So we, as much as possible, relied on things that were already accepted parts of the zoning ordinance. Now, a big thing was building-mounted solar energy systems are permitted by right in all zoning districts and are exempt from further regulation of this section. So anything that is mounted on a building, whether it's on the roof or on the sides, you get solar siding. It is an appurtenance of that structure, like putting on shingles or siding. You might have to get a building permit, you might have to get a solar permit, but it does not trigger the zoning ordinance for things like screening or height or distance requirements, noise requirements. It is not a solar array, it is not a solar farm, it is a building-mounted solar energy system. So that then basically leaves ground-mounted solar energy systems. If it's not on the building, it's on the ground. We haven't made floating ones yet, so when we add floating solar arrays, we'll deal with that later. Ground-mounted solar energy systems are broken into two categories: solar farms, which are principal use solar energy systems, and solar arrays, which are accessory use solar energy systems. Solar farms are permitted, as I mentioned before, as a special use in these zoning districts. You have to submit a site plan, and it requires it to have information on the number and location of the inverters, which are the noisy bits of a solar energy system, the solar panels, where the access drives are going to be, where the grid internet connection is going to be, and any other information required by the zoning administrator. And inverters shall be located at least 150 feet from property lines. So that ensures that the noisy bits are going to be a reasonable distance away from the property line and therefore from neighbors. But that's not the only thing that protects neighbors. Solar farms located within 500 feet of a residential use must provide a landscape buffer meeting our existing landscape buffer requirements that are elsewhere in the zoning ordinance. So the solar array that I talked about north of town, there are some houses nearby, it is still going to be required to have screening between those houses because those are residential uses. That is simply typically a 5-foot thick landscape buffer of trees and shrubs. If there's already existing landscaping there, it can satisfy that requirement, subject to approval of the zoning administrator. If that existing landscape dies in the future, that can trigger a requirement that that landscaping get replaced. And finally, solar farms must comply with applicable state and local regulations, including the City of Urbana's Code of Ordinances, Chapter 16, Noise and Vibrations. So what that means is if somebody has an exceptionally noisy inverter or an exceptionally noisy system, or the prevailing winds tend to carry noise further, and that noise reaches a certain level at the property line, then the developer would have to mitigate that, whether that's adding more landscaping buffer, putting up some sort of intervening noise wall, whatever. So then we get to the second type of solar energy system, the ground-mounted solar arrays. These are accessory use structures doing accessory use things for principal uses. They are permitted by right in all zoning districts. You don't need to get a new zoning permit. They must meet all the requirements or all the criteria for accessory structures that the zoning ordinance already lays out, and that they must comply with all other sections of the ordinance governing accessory structures. That could be height in a particular zoning district, and that's basically the main one. Solar arrays are excluded from gross floor area calculations. That means if you have a house in a zoning district or a building in a zoning district, depending on the zoning district, you can only cover so much of that parcel with impervious stuff, whether it's rooftop or pavement. And that calculation is the gross floor area of the house, which is all of the living area, square footage, divided by the overall lot size. And it comes up to some number. Because water running off of a solar array runs off down onto the ground and in between the rows of the solar array, it doesn't block water permeation into the ground like a roof does or any other sort of building footprint. So we decided, similar to other places, we're not going to treat a solar array as an impervious structure. If we had a pergola, that is another type of non-living space. It is not included in gross floor area calculations. Garages are not included in gross floor area calculations. So we're simply treating it as any other accessory structure is treated. In a similar fashion, we also don't include it in open space calculations, which is the requirement that a certain portion of your parcel be basically recreational green space or unpaved green space. We lay out some criteria there. I'm not going to bore you with them, but they're the exact same criteria that we use in the zoning ordinance for calculating other open space issues. If you have a balcony that's at least 6 foot high or 7 foot high, you can count the ground underneath it as open space. Similarly, if your solar array is 7 feet tall and you're using it as a pergola, then you can count the land underneath it as open space. And then the final requirement is that if you have a solar array in a residential district, it must be located behind the front face of the principal structure. So no ground-mounted arrays in your front yard. Sorry. That's probably the one departure that we had. You're allowed accessory structures in your front yard, but we frown on it. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but it has to meet a bunch of other development regulations, like not being in the required front yard or side yards. And then getting into the meat of it, here's the lovely table. It tells you the three styles: building-mounted solar, ground-mounted solar array, and ground-mounted solar farm. Tells you the districts they're allowed in or not allowed in, and what districts they're allowed as a special use in. Talks about the minimum setbacks from property lines, and it talks about the maximum system height. As you can see, for building-mounted systems, there's no regulation other than building code stuff, which is outside of zoning ordinance stuff. Ground-mounted solar arrays are permitted by right in all zoning districts. They have to meet the same requirements as other accessory structures in the zoning district you're going to locate it in. Same thing with meeting the height requirement. And then getting into the solar farm, it's special use in those districts. It must meet the yard requirements for principal structures because it is the principal use and then is treated as the principal structure. The minimum yard setbacks are much larger for principal structures because they're more massive. And it reiterates that inverters must be at least 150 feet from all property lines. And again, it also has to meet the height requirements for principal structures in that district. And that's it. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yep. So I have a question about going back to the previous slide on special use. Thank you, by the way, for the presentation, really comprehensive
Absolutely.
and I
And
think very interesting. And
Thank
a
you for your
great
input
introduction.
into making it happen.
On the special use, this gets into a little bit more of like the what happens when. So in special use, if there is an application for special use, does this go then before like the zoning and planning commission and they discuss it? So I'm wondering, like with the special
Sure.
use, is if the neighbors were going to object to the farm or want to express their support, is there a public comment sort of forum for them to do that related if it is a special use?
Yes. So all special use permits go to Plan Commission
Okay.
for review and then a recommendation that then goes to City Council.
And then permitted use does not, that sort of bypasses
Correct.
that.
Permitted use is deemed to be not something that requires commission review. It's handled by staff. It's like if somebody wants to build a house and it's zoned R2 and it's going to meet all the building codes, there's no reason for it to get reviewed by Plan Commission or City Council.
Okay. And then I have one more question. Again, I think it's the previous slide to here. Then this had to do with the gross floor area calculations and then the one where we were saying, you know, okay, no solar arrays in your front yard. I can think of a couple of different properties in Urbana that might be considered on like a double lot where you have a house on one side of the lot, the owners own the property right next door. Maybe the house has a lot of trees around it, but the property next door to it does not. Since this says it has to be behind the building, would that preclude the, I guess, the property owner from putting a ground-mounted solar array in the like double lot next door to their home?
They could, if what you're asking is, could they put it in front of the principal face?
Well,
or
if they were both front-facing. I went through this because of a property I was interested in. I'm sorry, because it is awfully specific, but I could see it happening.
Mhm.
So.
I think you could ask for a variance
ask for a
from the zoning
variance.
board of appeals and say, I know normally the solar array has to be behind the front of my house.
But my lot is right next door to it.
I have this other lot.
Can it be?
Part of the reason is we don't want, whatever that means, solar arrays to be the first thing that people see as they're driving down the street in front of houses.
And not to be confused with, you can definitely have solar panels on your roof.
Yes.
Facing the street, so there is no problem with that.
Right,
Okay.
right. If you had an argument that, this is the only place I can put one, then there are criteria to hear variances that ask about practical difficulties and special circumstances. And if you can make the argument that I would like this restriction to be waived,
Okay.
and maybe it's, you have a 25-foot setback and your house is 50 feet back because it's an old house, and that means you've got all this area that you can't use, whereas this person's house is 10 feet back, and they could then have all that space to put it. And then the zoning board of appeals might put conditions on it. Okay, yes, you can put up a solar array, but how about a landscape planting between the front yard and the solar array there's enough distance to not block the solar array, but it also helps screen it from, or say you already have a fence that would block seeing the solar array anyways, but we don't go into that detail here. You could say, I have this fence where people aren't going to see it anyways. Can I get a variance from that requirement?
Good deal. Thank you for letting me kind of dominate the conversation so far. I'm going to
No,
open this up
sorry.
to the other commissioners for questions or comments. Grace, go ahead.
Thanks again, Marcus, for giving us this presentation. I think I recall that this was, we did try and talk about this in SAC before it went to
Yes.
council, and so I appreciate that opportunity, and unfortunate that we weren't able to meet on our end, but I think that's great, and I appreciate it coming to SAC for kind of a recommendation also. I had a few specific questions. On screening, I was confused the way it's written. Is screening required, or it's no longer required because it's not, solar arrays aren't considered mechanical equipment anymore? Is that how that works out? Or is screening still required?
Screening is required for solar farms, the large principal use ones that are located within 500 feet of a residential use or structure, a residential use. It is not required for a solar array. So if you have a whole neighborhood of houses that are within 25 feet of each other, you wouldn't want to require screening between those and the neighboring residential uses. And they're also smaller structures, so we saw no need for screening for smaller structures. Solar farms are principal uses, and other principal uses like septic and sewer service places that have 100 porta-johns sitting outside, or a salvage yard or a construction yard. Those uses require screening between them and other residential uses because of the noxiousness of their outdoor presence. We are treating solar farms similar to those large-scale principal uses and requiring the same screening between residential uses and those noxious presences. So just for the principal use solar farms, not for the accessory use solar arrays.
Okay, and the solar stuff is not considered mechanical equipment anymore, right? It's just a
Correct.
structure. Okay, I was just confused on that screening of mechanical
Yeah.
equipment part in here.
We didn't get into the minutia of trying to define what's a mechanical or not, because we don't do that elsewhere in the zoning ordinance either. And when we tried going down that rabbit hole to clarify it, it just wasn't happening, because trying to define what a mechanical is like, plumbing pipes and air conditioners and furnaces. They're all things that help a building run, but we don't even try defining that elsewhere. And so we basically said, we're not going to treat solar as a mechanical in any fashion. It's either building mounted and exempt, or it's an accessory structure, or it's a principal use.
Thank you. And then another one I didn't think about earlier, so sorry to bring this up in our earlier conversations, but what came to mind too, when we were talking about the definitions of taking sunlight to make electricity, I didn't know if there was space in here for solar heaters or other non-electrical solar energy structures that would also be possibly roof-mounted or a separate structure.
So I believe, and this would be a building safety question that building code applies to. If you had a solar water heater, I don't think it would be considered a solar energy system, because its intended use is not to convert sunlight to electricity to be used as electricity to power the house. It's being converted to electricity to specifically heat water, I guess is where I would parse that statement.
So kind of more just like a regular, like a traditional water heater
Right.
or furnace or anything like that, right?
And again, if it's building mounted, it's exempt from the solar energy system ordinance anyways. But all of the building code still applies to everything. So they would still have to get an electrical permit. I don't think they would have to get a solar permit, but that would be definitely a building safety question.
Okay. And then I heard a rumor that in Urbana, like an HOA or a community group can't kind of make a rule that you can't have solar panels, that they can't kind of override the city's things. Is that true?
I believe there is state legislation that protects that. I will defer to Mr. Tess on that. I think he,
There's a state statute, I think it's referred to as the Solar Bill of Rights. It dramatically limits the ability of HOAs to prohibit rooftop solar mountings with HOA rules. It's not 100% prohibition against those types of HOA rules, but it's pretty significant.
Thank you. And then I just had two more quick things. One was the special use permit to, it's correct that also with that process, the applicant is required to notify people in a certain area close to there, right? And there's public input opportunities at that plan commission and at council, right?
the applicant isn't required to notify them, the city is required to notify them.
Okay.
So staff go through and figure out who the neighbors are within 250 feet of that property, plus all roadways. They send notices by regular mail. A sign is posted in the property. A legal notice is posted in a publication, which is the News Gazette in our case. And it would then also go to committee of the whole, assuming that it is a special use permit that includes new construction, because those situations also always go to committee of the whole for discussion before they go to full council for a vote. And typically, if something large were to happen, we would encourage the applicant to host a neighborhood meeting and present themselves to the neighborhood. It isn't a requirement like it is now with plan unit developments, but we encourage, direct communication between the applicants and the public.
Thank you. And then my last one was, there's already been updates about wind energy before this, right?
I don't think, no, the county has had updates on both wind and solar, but the city has not had a wind energy update, at least as.
There is a wind energy ordinance, but we haven't updated it, right?
Yes, there is a wind energy section in the zoning ordinance, yes, but we haven't had updates to it for a long time.
Okay. And, okay, last one. Would there be any impact, because the county doesn't have any jurisdiction in the city, right? Like if they had some more strict wind or solar requirements, that wouldn't impact the city, right?
Correct.
Okay, and the extra jurisdictional one, is that kind of in between?
The extraterritorial jurisdiction
Yeah.
only goes one way. The city, which is assumed to future annex outward, has 1.5 miles extraterritorial jurisdiction. The county does not have similar where they can, voice comments on things 1.5 miles into city limits.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments?
I did have one. Thank you for the presentation, Marcus. That was a really great overview. Sort of with this sort of creating like an opportunity for more solar farms to be introduced within those like select zones, is there more of an opportunity for like collective benefit for, say, surrounding like businesses or residents of a site where a solar farm could be implemented, or is that sort of redundant because of the cities like opportunities for solar for all and things of that?
I think I would leave it to Scott to respond to that. This is about removing one barrier,
Sure.
which has presented itself as zoning. If an individual or if a group of people or group of businesses wanted to do some sort of joint project, I think the city would be all for that.
Mhm. Maybe a question, have you seen that sort of happen in other communities where these sorts of regulatory barriers have been lifted and those sorts of sort of collective benefits?
I haven't seen a collective thing like that. I'm been out of the solar arena since I moved into this job, but some interesting things have happened. I don't think I've seen buildings where everything within the building, which might be multiple businesses, is powered by a rooftop solar system. Again, that would be exempt from our zoning anyways because it's building mounted. I think the ideas that we had previously of, say, a couple of vacant lots in a residential neighborhood would put in a system that would feed all the houses. It's difficult to do, I think, physically and from an engineering standpoint, and it makes more sense to have a large system that people own shares in and not necessarily get those actual electrons, but it gets contributed to the grid, and then they get credited for that. And now I will actually cede it over to Scott to talk about it.
I think that was a good answer.
Okay.
I think when we're talking about individual detached buildings that have roofs, it's just easier to put it on the roof rather than trying to share an array and then having long runs of electric lines that get cut by the gardener. And then, the opposite scale is what Marcus described, which is, a community solar array that's out there in the country and different households can subscribe to it. So I think probably the situations you're imagining would go one direction or the other rather than try and run multiple power lines from a single array.
Thank you.
And since Scott mentioned that, that made me then think of a really cool situation that is happening in Urbana that this ordinance is going to help, make happen. And we knew that it was coming through, which spurred us on to get the ordinance done, was the project. You've probably heard about MTD's hydrogen-fueled buses. Okay, those buses are fueled by hydrogen that's generated by MTD. The Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District owns land north of University Avenue. They had big rooftops and open space on the ground. They installed solar on the roof and the ground. And as I understand how the system is proposed, that electricity is directly wired to MTD's structure. The way our ordinance is written, though, it doesn't require the system to be located on the same lot as the principal use that it's powering. So those very large accessory arrays are powering the principal use across the street, which would not have been allowed under the previous zoning ordinance.
Thank you. I learned a lot. I really did.
And if you have, questions or suggestions, we're here.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Are there any announcements tonight from anybody? Okay, I don't have any either. I guess with nothing else on the agenda this evening, I'll go ahead and call the SAC meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much for coming tonight.